In 2010, a 13-year-old girl from a rural province in northeastern Thailand stood in a line with 4,000 other kids waiting for a 30-second shot to impress a panel of strangers from Seoul. 16 years later, that same girl sat front row at Louis Vuitton in Paris, was personally greeted by the most powerful man in the global fashion industry, and was named to the host committee of the Met Gala, the single most exclusive guest list on the planet. The easy explanation, the one the internet loves, is that she dated her way there, that a billionaire's son opened a door for her. But that explanation doesn't survive contact with the facts, because long before anyone linked her name to a luxury dynasty, Lisa was already building one of her own. This is the story of how a trainee with no money, no connections, and no ability to even speak the language of her new industry became someone the wealthiest family in fashion actually wanted at their table. Chapter 1. The One in 4,000. Let's start at the beginning, because the scale of where she started is the entire point. Lisa, born Lalisa Manoban, grew up in Buriram, a province in Thailand better known for its rice fields and its football stadium than for producing global pop stars. Her mother raised her with her Swiss stepfather, a chef. As a child, she danced in a local crew called We Za Cool, the kind of group that performs at school events and local festivals, not arenas. In 2010, YG Entertainment, one of South Korea's biggest talent agencies, held an open audition in Thailand. 4,000 kids showed up. Only one was selected. That one was a 13-year-old who had never set foot outside her home country. A year later, at 14, she packed her bags and moved to Seoul, alone. She didn't speak Korean. By her own account, the trainees around her were instructed not to speak English with her, to force her to learn faster. For 5 years, she trained, sometimes for 10 or 12 hours a day, with no guarantee she'd ever debut at all. That's not a detail. That's the whole foundation. Before there was a single luxury handbag in the picture, there were 5 years of total uncertainty in a country where she knew no one. In 2016, it paid off. She debuted as the 4th member of Blackpink, its only non-Korean member and arguably its most distinctive performer. The group would go on to become the best-selling girl group in history. But Lisa's story doesn't stop at successful idol. That's where most profiles end. It's where hers really begins. Chapter 2. The stage nobody thought she'd get. In 2019, Blackpink walked onto the Coachella stage and became the first female-led K-pop group to ever perform at the festival. 4 years later, in 2023, they returned and made history again, this time as the first K-pop act of any kind to headline it. That alone would be a career highlight for most artists, but Lisa wasn't finished. In April 2025, she returned to Coachella a 3rd time, this time entirely on her own, performing a solo set built around her debut album. The achievement made her the first K-pop act in the festival's history to perform on its stage 3 separate times. It wasn't a victory lap. Critics noted she broke choreography conventions rarely seen on K-pop stages, performing routines with a level of physicality and risk that most idols are kept far away from by image-conscious management. The message, intentional or not, was clear. She didn't need a group around her to command one of music's biggest stages. And less than a month earlier, she'd already made a different kind of history, becoming the first K-pop star to ever perform at the Academy Awards, joining a James Bond tribute medley alongside Doja Cat and Ray on one of the most watched broadcasts in American entertainment. 2 completely different rooms, a desert festival built for rock and hip-hop, and Hollywood's most traditional, old guard stage. And she'd just proven she belonged in both. Chapter 3. The Record Breaker. Here's the part of Lisa's story that rarely makes it into the headlines, because spreadsheets don't trend the way red carpet photos do. But the numbers are, frankly, absurd. When she released her debut solo single, Lalisa, in September 2021, its music video became the most viewed YouTube debut by a solo artist in 24 hours, breaking a record previously held by Taylor Swift. The single album went on to become the fastest-selling solo album by a female artist in South Korean history. 2 years later, her song Money, originally just a B-side, crossed 1 billion streams on Spotify, making her the first K-pop solo artist ever to have a track hit that number, and the fastest female solo K-pop artist in history to do it. By the time the dust settled, Guinness World Records had credited her with 9 separate world records, more than almost any other artist in the genre, male or female, group or solo. Add to that 2 Guinness titles for being the first solo K-pop winner at both the MTV Video Music Awards and the MTV Europe Music Awards. Plus, the record for most Instagram followers ever held by a K-pop artist, and a pattern starts to emerge. This isn't luck, and it isn't virality. It's the accumulated weight of someone who has been quietly outperforming the entire genre's metrics for years, building, number by number, the kind of leverage that makes luxury houses and award shows come calling on their own. Chapter 4. The Global Muse. By the early 2020s, Lisa wasn't just a pop star with good outfits. She'd become something fashion houses spend decades trying to manufacture artificially, a genuine tastemaker. In 2019, Celine named her a muse. Bulgari made her a global ambassador the same year. And then, in July 2024, Louis Vuitton, the largest single brand inside the LVMH empire, named her its newest house ambassador, with creative director Nicolas Ghesquière personally citing what he called her daring spirit and creative charisma. This wasn't a paid logo placement. She'd already been spotted front row at Louis Vuitton's Paris runway show months before the deal was even announced, the kind of access usually reserved for actresses, models, or the brand's own inner circle. By the time the official ambassadorship was confirmed, fashion insiders weren't surprised. They'd been watching her build toward it for over a year. Then came the moment that made it undeniable. In December 2025, it was announced that Lisa would join the host committee of the 2026 Met Gala, making her the first K-pop artist in the event's history to hold that role. She'd sit alongside Sabrina Carpenter, Doja Cat, Sam Smith, and Tiana Taylor, under co-chairs Beyoncé, Nicole Kidman, and Venus Williams. To understand how significant that is, you have to understand what the Met Gala actually is. It's not just a red carpet. It's the most curated 300 names in global culture, handpicked by Vogue's Anna Wintour and the Costume Institute. Being on the host committee isn't an invitation. It's an endorsement of your cultural relevance from the single most powerful gatekeeper in fashion. A girl from Buriram was now helping shape who got into the room. But fashion wasn't the only Western institution she was quietly working her way into. There was another industry entirely, one with its own gatekeepers, its own auditions, and its own version of "You don't belong here yet." Chapter 5. The Hollywood Beachhead. In late 2024, HBO's Emmy-winning anthology series, The White Lotus, was casting its 3rd season, set in Thailand. The show's creator and the casting team weren't familiar with Blackpink. They didn't know who Lisa was. She submitted a tape like everyone else, got a call back, then flew in for an in-person audition. She got the part. The role of Mook, a wellness mentor at the resort, marked her acting debut, credited under her birth name, Lalisa Manoban, in front of seasoned television actors who had no idea what to expect from a pop star walking onto their set. By her own admission, she was terrified. "I'm so nervous I was sweating," she said of her first day on set, recalling she'd blanked on her lines entirely. But cast members and producers alike described her as a natural. Professional, dedicated, and entirely unbothered by the gap between arena stages and a scripted scene. The show's executive producer would later say she blew us away. A few weeks after the show wrapped, she walked onto an even bigger stage, performing in a James Bond tribute medley at the 2025 Academy Awards alongside Doja Cat and Ray, becoming the first K-pop artist in history to perform at the Oscars. In the space of a few months, she'd gone from a pop star nobody in Hollywood had heard of, to a credited HBO actress, to a performer on the Oscars stage. That's not a brand deal. That's an industry deciding, on the basis of an audition tape and a live performance, that she belonged. Chapter 6. The Arnault Orbit. Here's where the story usually gets reduced to gossip, so let's be precise about what's actually been documented. Lisa has been photographed front row at multiple Louis Vuitton shows. She's been seen at LVMH-affiliated events in Seoul, Paris, and beyond. And on more than one occasion, cameras caught her in direct conversation with Bernard Arnault himself, the chairman and CEO of LVMH and one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, including a widely reported moment before a Paris Fashion Week show where witnesses described the two of them speaking directly. For years, tabloids have tied this access to her rumored relationship with Arnault's son, Frederic, the LVMH executive who has overseen Tag Heuer and now leads Loro Piana. Neither party has ever confirmed that relationship, and we're not here to litigate it. What's worth noticing instead is something the gossip coverage tends to skip entirely. Lisa's presence inside that world doesn't actually require a romance to explain it. She is, on paper, one of the public faces of their largest brand. Ambassadors get invited to family events. They get seated near executives. They get photographed with the people who run the company whose products they're paid to represent. Whatever else may or may not be true about her personal life, her access to that world has a far simpler, far less salacious explanation sitting in plain sight. She works there, at the highest level a brand ambassador can. And that distinction between being invited in and being employed at the top is about to become the entire thesis of this video. Chapter 7: The Equalizer. In December 2023, Blackpink renewed their group contract with YG Entertainment. But Lisa, along with her bandmates, did not renew her individual solo contract. In the K-pop industry, that's a seismic decision. It meant walking away from the machine that built her, with no guarantee anyone else would build something better. Instead, in February 2024, she founded her own company, Loud Co. 2 months later, Loud struck a partnership with RCA Records, and the headline detail wasn't the label's roster of stars, impressive as it is. It was the structure of the deal itself. Under the agreement, Lisa retains full ownership of her own master recordings. If you don't work in music, that single clause is easy to miss, but it's the difference between being a tenant and being a landlord. Most artists, even hugely famous ones, don't own their masters. Labels do. Every stream, every sync placement in a film or commercial, every future use of that music for decades to come flows through whoever owns the master. By keeping hers, Lisa didn't just put out an album, she built an asset, one that compounds in value the longer her career lasts, and one that nobody else can take from her. This is the part of her story that almost never makes it into the headlines about rings or red carpets, because it's not as visually dramatic as a paparazzi photo, but it's far more consequential. A brand ambassadorship makes you a face. A seat on a host committee makes you a tastemaker. But owning your own company, your own masters, and your own creative output makes you something else entirely. An operator, the kind of person a room full of executives takes seriously, not because of who she's seen with, but because of what she owns. That's the actual key that opens doors like the Arnault families. Not romance, equity. So here's the real arc, stripped of speculation. A 13-year-old beat 4,000 other kids for one spot. A 14-year-old moved to a country where she couldn't say her own name in the local language. A 20-something rebuilt her entire career structure from scratch rather than accept the deal everyone else was taking. And a brand built on 3 centuries of European heritage decided, on its own, that she belonged in the room, because she'd already made herself impossible to ignore. She didn't marry her way into elite Paris. She didn't date her way into a seat on the Met Gala host committee. She built a company, kept her masters, and let the work speak loudly enough that the wealthiest family in fashion came looking for her, not the other way around. So the next time you see a headline reducing her story to who she might be dating, ask yourself which version is actually more impressive: a girl who married into wealth, or one who built enough of her own that wealth simply had no choice but to notice her. Let us know which chapter of her story surprised you the most.